At 12:51 p.m. on November 30th, 2021, Ethan Crumbley walked out of the boys' bathroom at Oxford High School and opened fire. He was born in 2006 in Atlantic Beach, Florida, and later raised in Michigan. His parents, Jennifer, Jen, and James Crumbley, had minor run-ins with the law in earlier years. The family eventually settled in Oxford, Michigan. Initially, Ethan had no history of behavioral issues at school, but in early 2021, he began sending disturbing messages referencing demons and ghosts. He also harmed animals, built homemade explosive devices, and stored a bird's severed head in a jar. Despite these clear warning signs, his parents did not seek mental health support. In late November 2021, James purchased a 9mm Sig Sauer pistol as a present for Ethan. On November 27th, the two visited a shooting range, where Ethan practiced firing the weapon. Jennifer later posted a photo from that outing, showing them at the range together. Just 2 days later, on November 29th, a teacher noticed a drawing on Ethan's assignment that depicted a handgun and a bullet. Written near it were disturbing phrases like, "The thoughts won't stop," "Help me," and "Red everywhere." School officials contacted his parents, but they took no steps to seek help. The following day, Ethan was caught searching online for ammunition during class. Again, staff alerted Jennifer, who replied via text, "LOL, I'm not mad at you. You have to learn not to get caught." No mental health evaluation or follow-up was arranged. On November 30th, 2021, at approximately 12:51 p.m., Ethan, then 15 years old, entered Oxford High School with a loaded pistol and 50 rounds of ammunition. After going into the boys' restroom, he fired the gun, then walked into a hallway and opened fire on fellow students. 4 were fatally wounded. 7 more, including a teacher, were injured. Authorities later determined the event was premeditated. His writings revealed deep resentment and a desire for recognition. Videos recorded the night before outlined his intentions to harm classmates and cause widespread chaos. Following the shooting, Ethan surrendered peacefully. He was tried as an adult and charged with 24 offenses. These included 4 counts related to the fatalities, several charges for mass harm, 7 attempted harm counts, and 12 for unlawful firearm possession. His parents, James and Jennifer, were also charged, each with 4 counts tied to their negligence in the lead-up to the shooting. They had failed to secure the weapon and ignored multiple red flags. It was the first time in U.S. history that parents were charged in connection with a school shooting carried out by their child. In January 2022, Ethan initially pleaded not guilty due to mental illness, but he later abandoned that claim in October and admitted the guilt on all charges. The court emphasized the extent of his planning. Evidence showed he had fired through barricaded doors and aimed at vulnerable targets, underscoring his intent. A major point of debate was whether his age and mental health should lessen his responsibility. In September 2023, the judge ruled that, despite these factors, Ethan was eligible for a life sentence without parole. The decision was based on the perceived threat he continued to pose. On December 8, 2023, Ethan received a life sentence without the possibility of release, along with an additional 24 years. Addressing the judge in court, he said, "I am a really bad person. I have done terrible things that no one should ever do. Any sentence that the victims ask for, I ask that you do impose it on me." By early 2024, both of Ethan's parents were found guilty of contributing to the tragedy. Their separate trials revealed they had ignored clear signs of their son's decline and failed to keep the weapon secure. In April 2024, each was sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison. Jennifer expressed regret, stating she had not realized how serious things had become. James acknowledged he had been unaware of Ethan's mental state and accepted the court's judgment. The next story starts with an obsession for horror films. It ends with a real one. Torrey Michael Adamczyk was born in 1990 in Pocatello, Idaho. He grew up in a residential neighborhood with his parents, Shannon and Sean Adamczyk, along with his siblings. His mother worked for a local newspaper. Those who knew the family later described them as typical. No one expected what was to come. Torrey had a passion for filmmaking and horror films, an interest that would evolve into something disturbing. On September 22, 2006, 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart was watching her relative's house in Tyhee, Idaho. She invited her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, to keep her company. Later, their friend Joey Davis stopped by. Not long after, classmates Brian Draper and Tori Adamsick arrived. They claimed they were headed to see a film. In reality, they were scouting the home. That night, Draper and Adamsick returned in disguise, wearing masks and dressed in dark clothing. They had cut the power and brought hunting weapons. Their intent was to exert control and gain notoriety. Investigators later uncovered that the two had drawn up a list of intended victims. Cassie was listed first because she would be alone. After Matt left around 11:30 p.m., the pair shut off the lights again. They crept upstairs and used sharp weapons to wound Cassie more than 29 times. She put up a fight, but did not survive. Detectives began by lifting prints from the circuit box. Cassie's mother's partner was initially questioned but ruled out. Then Matt mentioned that Draper and Adamsick had visited that night. Both denied involvement when first approached by police, Draper later confessed. He claimed the plan had started as a joke but escalated when Adamsick began targeting Cassie. They led authorities to a spot in Black Rock Canyon, where they had stashed their masks, clothing, weapons, and a broken video camera. Forensic experts managed to retrieve footage from the device. The video captured them plotting the act and boasting afterward in a horror movie style. In one chilling moment, they said, "We just took Cassie's life. This is not a joke." Another line referred to themselves as sick in the head. One remarked, "We want to be just like Scream." These recordings became key evidence in the case. What led Adamsick down this path? Both he and Draper felt like outsiders. They were drawn to cruel fantasies and sought recognition. They idolized fictional villains from Scream and even expressed admiration for individuals involved in past school tragedies. Their goal was to surpass them. Draper admitted, "I felt like a nobody. I'd be somebody if I did something big and bad." His admission revealed the mindset behind their actions. Adamsick was taken into custody on September 27, 2006. He was charged with first-degree homicide and conspiracy. His trial began on May 31, 2007. The video and physical evidence found in the canyon were critical to the case. The defense argued they were trying to make a horror film and lost control. The jury didn't accept that explanation. On June 8, 2007, the jury found Adamsick guilty on both charges. He was sentenced on August 21, 2007, to life imprisonment without parole, plus additional time for conspiracy. He later appealed, citing ineffective legal representation and claiming the sentence was too harsh for a juvenile. In December 2017, Idaho's Supreme Court upheld the verdict and sentence. All efforts to reduce his punishment were unsuccessful. As of 2025, Adamsick is incarcerated at the Idaho State Correctional Institution in Kuna, Idaho. Both he and Draper are serving life terms with no possibility of release. Draper has publicly expressed remorse. He said, "I regret it every day of my life. You lose your entire life. I would give my life if I could change it." Alyssa Bustamante was born in January 1994 in California. Her parents were both teenagers. Her mother, Michelle, was just 15 and struggled with substance issues. Her father, Caesar, had legal troubles and spent time in custody. When Alyssa was 8, she and her 3 younger siblings went to live with their grandparents, Gary and Karen Brooke, in St. Martins, Missouri. Life remained unstable. The family moved frequently. Most of the time, Alyssa lived with her grandparents in a quiet but tense household. At age 13, she attempted to harm herself. Staff at her school discovered deep marks on her arms. Doctors later diagnosed her with depression and personality-related symptoms. She began therapy and was prescribed medication to help manage her mental health. On October 21, 2009, when Alyssa was 15, she invited 9-year-old Elizabeth Olton into the woods behind their homes. Elizabeth, who trusted her, followed Alyssa's younger half-sister Emma, unaware of what was ahead. In a small, secluded section of forest, Alyssa took her life using physical force. She struck her multiple times. A few days earlier, Alyssa had already prepared a shallow grave. It was clear the act had been planned in advance. When questioned by police, Alyssa admitted she wanted to understand what it felt like to end a life. Her personal journal described the experience as amazing and pretty enjoyable. She even wrote that she planned to attend church shortly after. Officers spent 2 days searching for Elizabeth. Alyssa later guided them directly to the burial spot, where Elizabeth was found beneath leaves and soil. Investigators examined Alyssa's diary and found additional writings that referenced hurting others. A handwriting analyst uncovered a hidden note where she wrote, "I just ended a life. It was amazing. Pretty enjoyable. Gotta go to church now. LOL." Even with her grandmother present during questioning, Alyssa stayed calm and explained what happened with little visible emotion. In November 2009, Alyssa was charged with the highest level of unlawful loss of life and for using a weapon during the act. She initially entered a not guilty plea, but in January 2012 she accepted a plea agreement. She changed her plea to guilty for a reduced charge of unlawful fatal conduct and admitted to using a weapon. Her legal team argued that her age and emotional health should be taken into account. They said her brain was still developing and highlighted her history of self-harm and her medical diagnoses. Mental health experts pointed out that depression, borderline personality traits, and impulsive behavior, possibly influenced by medication, may have impacted her decisions. Prosecutors, however, emphasized that the act was carefully thought out. Alyssa had dug the grave in advance, picked the moment, and hid the evidence. On February 6th and 7, 2012, Alyssa spoke directly to the judge. She said, "I'm sorry, and if I could give my life to get Elizabeth's back, I would." Judge Pat Joyce sentenced her to life in prison for the reduced charge, along with an additional 30 years for using a weapon during the incident. Due to updates in youth sentencing laws, she became eligible to request a review in January 2024. Alyssa appealed her sentence in 2014, but it was denied. She remains at the Chillicothe Correctional Center in Missouri. In July 2024, she appeared for her first review hearing, but her request for release was denied. A new law passed that year now prevents early release in such cases. Even if she becomes eligible for parole on the life sentence, the additional 30-year term means her earliest possible release date would be around 2059, when she would be 65 years old. Up next, 3 nights, 2 lives ended, 1 child on trial. If you find stories like this important, consider subscribing for more. Thomas J. McLeod Jr. was born in 1993 in Michigan. By August 2008, he was 14 years old and attending Jefferson Middle School in Pontiac. He had no previous record of aggressive behavior at home, nor any known contact with law enforcement before what followed. In late August 2008, McLeod joined classmates Dantes Tillman and Darren Higgins Jr. in a series of events that unfolded over several nights in downtown Pontiac. Their targets were unhoused men. Over the course of 3 nights, they were involved in 4 separate incidents. 2 of those incidents resulted in fatalities. The first occurred in an alley behind a nightclub. The group encountered Wilford "Frenchie" Hamilton, a 61-year-old man experiencing homelessness. They inflicted serious harm. McLeod later admitted to hitting Hamilton in the face multiple times and continuing the altercation after Hamilton was on the ground. Witnesses said Hamilton's face was badly swollen. The group searched his pockets and took his wallet, which was later found discarded. There was no cash in it. Hamilton was hospitalized with critical brain injuries and later passed away from them. The following night, the same group came across 65-year-old Lee Hoffman, another unhoused man, in a small public park. McLeod again took part. He stated he punched Hoffman around 5 times and kicked him after he fell. Hoffman lost consciousness and sustained major brain trauma. He passed nearly a month later from his injuries. During that act, the group took about $80 from his pockets, and McLeod admitted receiving a portion of the money. The next day, the trio were involved in 2 additional altercations with other men. During one of those, McLeod was spotted and arrested after attempting to flee the area. He was prosecuted as an adult and faced charges of first-degree felony homicide tied to theft. Prosecutors argued that both losses occurred during attempted thefts, Hamilton's wallet and Hoffman's money. Under Michigan law, causing a fatal injury during a theft or attempted theft can result in this charge. In October 2009, a jury found McLeod guilty on 2 felony counts related to a robbery that resulted in loss of life. At sentencing in December 2009, both McLeod and a co-defendant showed emotion in court. He received a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In May 2013, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld the convictions but overturned the life sentence. The court referenced a 2012 U.S. Supreme Court ruling which found mandatory life sentences for minors unconstitutional. The case was returned to a lower court for resentencing. This new hearing would require the judge to consider McLeod's age at the time of the crime, his personal development, background, and the likelihood of rehabilitation. His original sentence had not accounted for these factors. Originally, McLeod had received life without parole. After the appeals court ruling, a judge would now need to weigh his youth, upbringing, and potential for change. As of 2025, he remains incarcerated. A strange illness made the next teenager famous. But it also may have masked something far more serious. Jennifer Ann Mee was born in 1991 in St. Petersburg, Florida. Her early life was largely uneventful, but in 2007, at age 15, she developed a rare and intense case of hiccups, up to 50 per minute. The hiccups continued nonstop for 5 weeks. Doctors, family, and even alternative healers tried everything they could. sugar, peanut butter, breathing techniques, hypnosis, and acupuncture. Nothing helped. Then, without warning, the hiccups stopped on their own. The unexpected media attention changed her life overnight. She appeared on national TV shows and was even hugged by country star Keith Urban. Not long after, she ran away from home. Later reports suggested she may have been struggling with her mental health. At her trial, her defense team said she had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and Tourette's syndrome. In October 2010, Jennifer, then 19, met 22-year-old Shannon Griffin online. He worked for a major retail company. Jennifer said she wanted to make a small purchase, and Griffin agreed to meet her at an empty house in St. Petersburg. But waiting inside were Jennifer's boyfriend, Lamont Newton, and her friend, Laren Rayford. Both were armed with small-caliber handguns. Their goal was to take money from Griffin. But when he resisted, things escalated. Griffin was struck multiple times in the chest and did not survive. Authorities responded quickly. Jennifer, Newton, and Rayford were taken into custody within hours. Investigators found Jennifer's DNA on Griffin's clothing and his ID card, which was discovered at an apartment the three shared. Although Jennifer didn't use a weapon herself, Florida law considers anyone involved in a fatal robbery attempt equally responsible for the outcome. Her trial began in mid-September 2013 in Pinellas County. She faced a charge related to a fatal outcome during an attempted theft. The prosecution admitted she didn't use a weapon but argued that she initiated the setup. Jennifer's lawyer, John Trevena, said she was mentally unwell and not in control of her actions. He cited her medical diagnoses and said the hiccups were physical symptoms related to neurological issues. He argued she wasn't the one in charge, but a vulnerable teen drawn into a dangerous situation. The judge temporarily paused the trial to evaluate whether she understood what was happening. At one point, her lawyer asked the jury, "What did she really intend?" The defense claimed she never imagined the situation would turn fatal. But prosecutors played a phone call Jennifer made to her mother from jail. In it, she said, "I didn't harm anyone on purpose. I set it all up. It just went wrong, Mom." That call became key evidence. Prosecutors reminded the jury that under state law, if someone loses their life during a crime like this, it meets the definition for the most serious charge. On September 20th, 2013, after 4 hours of discussion, the jury found Jennifer legally responsible. She cried when the verdict was read. Judge Nancy Motley sentenced her to life behind bars with no possibility of early release. Her friend Rayford had already received the same outcome. Newton's case was still pending at the time. After the trial, her legal team requested a new hearing. They argued that her past media exposure and medical conditions could have influenced the jury unfairly. The judge denied the request. The case continued to make headlines. Some legal experts suggested that a male in the same situation might have faced a lighter sentence. Darrell Barrera Jr. was a teenager living in San Antonio, Texas, just a few streets away from Caitlin Hernandez. Court documents later described his home life as unstable. A psychologist said his father was strict and harsh, while his mother had previously spent time in prison. He had tried to harm himself on more than one occasion. He had also started harming animals. Using a hunting instrument, he ended the lives of raccoons and dogs. He had developed a concerning dependence on inappropriate content. By March of 2024, he was only 15 years old, but the warning signs were already present. The dysfunction at home, the cruelty, the quiet downward spiral. It seemed like something was building toward a breaking point. On the evening of March the 12th, 2024, 17-year-old Caitlin Hernandez, a senior at Roosevelt High School, went out for a walk. She never made it home. Witnesses had seen her earlier that evening with Barrera, who lived nearby. Later that night, her body was discovered in a drainage ditch beneath a bridge on Del Oak Drive. Investigators observed signs that pressure had been applied to her neck and that she had head injuries from a strong impact. It appeared someone had moved her into the ditch afterward. Barrera was arrested soon after, but officers initially couldn't confirm his identity. It wasn't until a few weeks later that DNA found at the scene was matched to him. In court, experts tried to understand what had led to the tragedy. Testimony revealed a mix of difficult experiences at home, emotional challenges, and deep-rooted frustration. He had already accepted a no-contest plea in a separate case involving harm to animals. He showed signs of serious emotional instability. Whether he acted impulsively or had planned what happened remained unclear. The records didn't offer a single explanation. Psychological reports described a young person overwhelmed by trauma and lacking support. In November 2024, although he was still underage, a hearing was held to determine if he would face charges as an adult. Judge William Shaw of the 436th Juvenile Court made the decision to move the case forward in adult court. Barrera entered a no-contest plea to a lesser charge connected to the loss of life. He did not admit guilt, but agreed to waive a jury trial. On June 13, 2025, Judge Shaw sentenced him to 35 years in prison. He will have the opportunity to request early release after serving a portion of that sentence. At the sentencing hearing, Caitlin's family spoke directly to the court. They said they didn't believe he had truly accepted responsibility. Still, they expressed some relief that he would spend years in custody. Her mother shared that the grief hasn't faded. It just lives quietly now. The pain, she said, is still present every day. Next is a 15-year-old, one choice. And it shattered 3 families. Alex Santiago Perdomo was born in 2006. He grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, in a Hispanic community. Public records reveal few details about his home life. As a teenager, he became involved in growing tensions surrounding East High School in Des Moines. At 15, he was a student there, like many of his peers. Those who knew him described him as quiet and reserved. Still, he eventually became part of a group that would soon make news for tragic reasons. On March the 7th, 2022, just before the school day ended, several vehicles pulled up near East High School. Alex was in one of them. Inside that vehicle was a Glock 9mm handgun. Moments later, 8 shots were fired toward a group of students. Among them were Jose Lopez, his sister, her friend, and 2 others. Investigators later matched 8 shell casings to the firearm linked to Alex. Jose Lopez, who was 15, did not survive. 2 girls, Kemery Ortega and Jessica Lopez Torres, sustained serious injuries. In total, more than 35 shots were fired from multiple vehicles. Law enforcement said the incident was tied to conflict between rival peer groups and was intended as retaliation. Within hours, 6 teens aged 14 to 17 were arrested. In time, 10 individuals faced legal consequences. Some were transferred to adult court, while others remained in the juvenile system. Alex was charged with causing a fatal outcome and with injuring others. He chose to accept a plea deal instead of going through a full trial. In November 2023, he formally admitted responsibility for causing a loss of life. This plea allowed him to bypass a jury and led to a long-term sentence with a chance for review later due to his age at the time. Prosecutors stated that he would stay at a youth facility until he turned 18, specifically the state training school in Eldora. On November 4, 2024, Alex Santiago Perdomo was given a life sentence with the possibility of parole. He was 17 at the time, though the charges related to actions taken when he was 15. Another teen involved in the same case had already received a similar outcome. During the hearing, a chaplain from the training school shared that Alex had shown growth and remorse. The judge also required him to pay $150,000 in restitution to the Lopez family. The final ruling acknowledged that he intentionally caused a fatal outcome. While the sentence is lengthy, it includes the possibility of a future review. The restitution total remains set at $150,000. The next teen lived in a tent. What police found inside changed everything. Daniel Ryan Gore was born in 2005 in Oregon. By 2022, he was living without parents or guardians. He stayed in a tent, located in Beaverton, as part of a larger outdoor camp near Westside Linear Park. According to court documents, there was no sign of a stable home or consistent family support. Legal records described him as a teen living outdoors, unsupervised. This lack of oversight may have allowed certain troubling behaviors to go unchecked until a tragic event brought them to light. On Sunday, May 8th, 2022, 13-year-old Milana Lee left her Beaverton home in the late afternoon. She never returned. The next morning, her mother, who worked overnight, realized she was missing. She checked in with friends and contacted the school, but no one had seen Milana. By May 10th, a friend and that friend's mother followed a feeling and went searching in a nearby wooded area Milana was known to visit. They found her shoes and some clothing. Officers launched a search shortly afterward and discovered her body beneath a blanket, partially submerged in a creek at Westside Linear Park. Both the tarp and blanket closely matched materials seen in Gore's tent nearby. Investigators began piecing together who was involved. Surveillance footage captured Gore and Milana together around 7:45 p.m. on May 8th. Phone records later placed them in the wooded area that evening. Gore's device later returned to the encampment area. Police located Gore at a public library 2 days after Milana went missing. When approached, he fled through an emergency exit, confirming investigators' suspicions. He was found shortly afterward, hiding on the balcony of a nearby apartment. Inside his tent, officers found a journal with disturbing sketches and references to fictional characters known for dark or harmful behavior. One line read, "I feel like Dexter," referencing a TV show about someone who leads a double life. Investigators also collected photos and browsing history that showed an interest in harmful content. Authorities believed this supported the idea that he had been preparing for harmful behavior. Further evidence linked him to the scene. Straps from his tarp matched those found nearby. His phone data and DNA were also tied to the location. His internet searches pointed to prior interest in planning harmful acts. Although Gore was 16 at the time, a judge determined he would be tried in adult court. The decision was based on the belief that he fully understood the weight of his actions. The trial began in November 2024 and lasted 2 weeks. Prosecutors presented phone records, surveillance footage, DNA analysis, journal entries, and social media content. They claimed Gore had lured Milana into the woods with intent to carry out a premeditated act targeting someone younger who trusted him. On November 22, 2024, the jury found him responsible on all charges: first-degree loss of life, first-degree non-consensual behavior, and first-degree physical harm. On December 2nd, the judge sentenced him to life in prison. Due to parole reform discussions, reports vary. Some say he may be eligible for review after 15 years, while others say it could be at least 30. He was also ordered to pay over $55,000 to Milana's family. Following the sentencing, Gore was placed at McLaren Youth Correctional Facility, a juvenile facility in Oregon where he began serving his time. The next teenager was the pastor's daughter, a straight-A student. So how did a quiet Texas night end in fire and tragedy? Erin Michelle Caffey was born in 1991 in the small town of Alba, Texas. She was raised in a deeply religious home. Her father, Terry, was a youth pastor. Her mother, Penny, played piano at their church. Erin sang in the choir. Her younger brothers, 13-year-old Matthew and 8-year-old Tyler, were learning to play guitar and harmonica. Music was a big part of their lives. Erin had been homeschooled for years due to attention difficulties, but just over a month before everything changed, the family returned to public school. In 2007, Erin began a relationship with 18-year-old Charlie Wilkinson. Her parents were uneasy about him. His MySpace profile included references to drinking and inappropriate language, things that went against their beliefs. In February 2008, Erin missed her phone curfew and her parents told her she could no longer see Charlie. Around that time, Erin told another classmate, Michael Washburn, that she sometimes wished her family weren't around anymore. It showed how upset she had become. She blamed her parents for keeping her and Charlie apart, and then came up with a plan. She asked Charlie to help carry it out. He brought in a friend, Charles Wade, and Wade's girlfriend, Bobby Johnson. Erin stayed outside in the car. She had unlocked the front door ahead of time. Charlie told Wade there was $2,000 in a lockbox inside as an incentive. At one point, Charlie suggested they just run away. But Erin reportedly replied, "No, end their lives." Prosecutors later used her messages and call logs to argue that she meant exactly that. In the early morning hours of March 1st, 2008, Charlie and Wade entered the Caffey home. Penny was the first to be targeted. Then a sword was used in an extremely brutal way. Matthew was shot after yelling, "Charlie, why are you doing this?" Tyler was hurt several times. Terry Caffey, Erin's father, was shot 5 times, but managed to crawl out of the house and reach a neighbor more than an hour later. Before leaving, they set the house on fire. Erin and Bobby stayed in the car during the entire event. As flames spread, Erin was reportedly heard saying, "Holy S, that was awesome." All 4 were arrested within 24 hours at Wade's trailer. Erin claimed she had been given substances and forced to go along with it. But her story quickly fell apart when Charlie, Wade, and Johnson all said she was the one who came up with the idea. Erin was charged as an adult on 3 counts of capital offense. Prosecutors initially pushed for the highest possible sentence. But her father, Terry, asked the court not to pursue the most severe penalties for any of those involved. In January 2009, Erin agreed to a plea deal. She was sentenced to 2 life terms plus 25 years. She'll be eligible to request release at age 59. Charlie Wilkinson and Charles Wade received life sentences without the possibility of parole. Bobby Johnson, who played a lesser role, was sentenced to 2 40-year terms to run at the same time. She can request release after serving 20 years. Erin was only 17 when she was sentenced. It was her father's plea for mercy that helped prevent her from receiving the harshest outcome. During the hearing, Terry looked at her and said, "I forgive you, Erin. I refuse to grow into a bitter old man." Erin said little in return. No statement or final request was recorded. She is currently serving her sentence at the Hilltop Unit in Gatesville, Texas. She and her father still meet once a month. Terry believes she can grow and change over time. Erin has since described what happened as a series of bad choices and said she never thought it would spiral out of control. She later appeared in a documentary where she sang "Amazing Grace" and reflected on the choices that led to that night. Now, did the system fail the next teen, or was he always destined to break? Jacob IND was raised in a household that appeared ordinary from the outside. But behind closed doors, life was anything but normal. His mother was Pamela Jordan, and his stepfather was Kermode Jordan. They lived in Woodland Park, Colorado. Jacob and his older brother experienced years of mistreatment, physical, emotional, and deeply inappropriate. Court documents and testimony later described what were called bathroom sessions, during which the boys were restrained and touched in unacceptable ways. Jacob also shared that he was forced into inappropriate actions by his mother until age 12. By that time, he had already begun thinking about ways to end the pain. In the early hours of December 17, 1992, Jacob put a long-considered plan into action. He enlisted the help of 18-year-old Gabriel Adams. Together, they entered the bedroom where Pamela and Kermode were sleeping. According to reports, they used both a firearm and a sharp object. They also sprayed bear repellent in the couple's faces. After they left the house, both adults later passed away from their injuries. Jacob was only 15 years old. The event stunned the quiet community in Colorado. Jacob later explained that he didn't act out of hate alone. He felt there was no other way out. He described his life as constant pain. In his words, he reached a point where the only options he saw were to harm his parents or harm himself. When he pointed the weapon at his mother, she asked why. He told her, "Because you were cruel." He said this wasn't a sudden decision. It was something he had thought about for years. In 1994, Jacob was tried on 2 counts of premeditated fatal conduct. His defense attorney did not allow him to speak in his own defense, fearing that his calm demeanor might not connect well with the jury. The jury found him responsible and sentenced him to life in prison with no chance of release. Years later, Jacob's legal team fought for a new trial, arguing that he should have been allowed to testify. In 2017, a judge agreed and overturned the original verdict. A new trial was scheduled, but instead of going through a full courtroom process again, Jacob accepted a plea deal in November 2018. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree responsibility. In January 2019, his sentence was set at 60 years, including credit for the 26 years he had already served. With that credit applied, he became eligible to request release under parole guidelines. At the new sentencing, Jacob spoke openly and emotionally. He said that becoming an adult meant being honest about the past. He recalled harsh labels he had been called as a child, including a disgusting rotten boy, and said those words had stayed with him. His wife, Denise, traveled from Northern Ireland to speak on his behalf. She described knowing Jacob through many years of hardship and asked the court for compassion. During the hearing, a mental health professional testified that Jacob's mother had shown clear signs of harmful behavior, supporting Jacob's claims that he acted in desperation. The prosecution, however, maintained that the act was planned, deliberate, and devastating, and pushed for the full sentence to remain. Under the terms of the agreement in early 2019, Jacob's sentence was set at 60 years, backdated to when he was first taken into custody. He was released from a Colorado state facility sometime in 2021. No one saw coming what happened in the next case, but he had thought about it for years. Nathan was born in late 1981. Throughout his childhood, his family moved frequently, over 30 times by the time he was a teenager. They relocated often in an effort to leave instability behind. His mother, Julie Ibanez, was around 27 when he was born. His father was rarely around. Nathan later described his home life as full of emotional distance, ongoing tension, and substance issues. In a journal, he wrote that the hidden pain from those years left him feeling deeply vulnerable. As he entered his teenage years, Nathan became more withdrawn. He often felt overwhelmed and frustrated. His mood shifted unpredictably. He attended high school in Highlands Ranch, a suburb near Denver known for its wealth and safety. There, he formed a strong friendship with Erik Jensen. The two played in a local metal band named Troublebound. On June 5, 1998, when Nathan was 15, a serious incident occurred involving his mother, Julie, inside their home. The situation escalated suddenly and caused severe injuries. While many of the exact details were not released publicly, records confirm the event was extremely serious. Erik Jensen, who was 17 at the time, arrived either during or shortly after the event. He helped cover up what had happened. Though he denied being involved in the harm itself, his actions became a major factor in how the case moved forward. There was no clear explanation in the official records. Nathan himself once said, "It just seemed to be something without a reason." His difficult upbringing likely played a role. Some speculated whether it was a mental health crisis or an act driven by emotional overload. The absence of a clear motive left many searching for answers. Nathan was taken into custody the following day. Although he was still a minor, he was charged in adult court. The decision came partly because of the severity of the situation and heightened public concern. It had happened shortly after a major school tragedy elsewhere in the country, which made local attitudes especially strict. His trial began in October 1998 in Castle Rock and lasted just 2 days. The defense did not bring forward any witnesses. At that time, public opinion in Colorado was particularly unforgiving toward young people involved in serious cases. News coverage focused heavily on when teens from quiet neighborhoods caused harm, which contributed to a zero-tolerance environment. During closing remarks, the prosecution described Nathan as a bad seed. Nathan later said it felt like he was viewed as nothing more than a troubled kid. The jury found him responsible for what had happened to his mother. Just 2 days later, at age 16, he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of early release. This decision came during a period of especially tough policies. In 1998, Colorado handed out more life terms to teens than ever before. Over time, rates of serious youth cases declined. But in that era, especially following high-profile incidents, strict sentencing was already the norm. Years later, policies around youth sentencing began to shift. In 2019, Governor Jared Polis revised Nathan's terms. He became eligible to seek release after serving 40 years. The next teen didn't pull the trigger, but he paid the highest price. Erik Brendan Jensen was raised in Highlands Ranch, Colorado, in a stable upper-middle-class household. His parents, Kurt and Pat Jensen, described him as intelligent, kind, and compassionate from a young age. He had a close relationship with his family, and both parents were actively involved in his education and daily life. Erik was known for being thoughtful and supportive, often checking in on classmates who were going through tough times. One of those friends was Nathan Yibanez, who would later share that he faced serious challenges at home. In June 1998, when Erik was 17, he went to Nathan's house. At the time, Nathan was 16 and struggling with intense emotions. He believed his mother posed a threat and took actions that led to her passing. Erik was present and did not step in. He later said, "I sat 3 feet away from somebody who was dying, and I didn't save her. I could have." Afterward, Erik helped Nathan and another friend clean up the scene. They moved the body and removed visible stains. His defense team argued he was not directly responsible for what happened. The prosecution claimed he knew about the plan in advance, and that he helped both during and after the event. The following morning, Nathan was found near his mother's body in a public park and was taken into custody. Erik and the other friend were arrested shortly after. One of the friends was granted immunity in exchange for testifying against Erik. That friend told the court Erik had helped plan what happened and had struck Julie Yibanez with a fireplace tool. Erik's trial took place in August 1999. His attorneys claimed he was under the influence at the time and didn't fully grasp what was happening. The jury rejected that explanation. He was found guilty of a first-degree charge based on helping plan the event and covering it up afterward. In August 1999, Erik was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of early release. He also received additional years for his role in assisting, as required by Colorado law at the time. While serving time, Erik focused on self-improvement. He earned a GED and an associate degree, found spiritual direction, and became a certified CrossFit coach. He co-founded a wellness program for inmates struggling with substance use. Despite his progress, he remained haunted by that night. In a 2019 court appearance, he said with remorse, "I sat 3 feet away from somebody who was dying. I could have stopped it." His parents questioned why his punishment ended up being harsher than Nathan's, who was the one directly involved. Nathan's sentence was later reduced, and Erik's family said they struggled to understand how that made sense. In 2012, a Supreme Court decision ruled that automatic life sentences without review for minors were not allowed under Miller v. Alabama. Colorado revised its laws, allowing people sentenced as minors to seek review after serving 40 years. In May 2019, a judge resentenced Erik. He still had a life term, but was now eligible for a parole review after 40 years. With time already served, he could appear before a board in about a decade. Colorado law had previously required identical sentences for minors convicted in the same case, regardless of individual roles. This strict rule sparked public debate about how young people should be treated in the justice system. By 2019, Erik had served 2 decades behind bars and had become a respected figure among fellow inmates for his leadership and growth. In December 2019, after a full review of his case by the governor, Erik's sentence was reduced and he was released. After his release, Erik reflected on what it meant to have a second chance. Sitting in Denver's Union Station, a place he first visited with his father as a teen, he expressed deep gratitude. He said it felt like finally being able to breathe. He was determined to make the most of the opportunity and to give back in honor of those who had believed in him. The next individual was just 17. One decision changed two lives forever. Andrew Michael Medina was 17 years old when a serious incident occurred in Colorado Springs during the late 1990s. He was raised in a typical suburban household. His family was middle class, and his parents were involved in local community activities. He was known as a quiet teen. He attended nearby schools and enjoyed sports and video games. Friends described him as polite, though somewhat reserved. As time went on, he began spending time with peers who were frequently in trouble. Online records from that period are limited, but local sources noted minor issues like shoplifting and pranks. There were no signs of major emotional health concerns at the time. Still, those close to him noticed a shift in his behavior once he reached high school. On March 4th, 1999, Andrew attempted to take control of a delivery truck outside an ice cream shop in Old Colorado City. He was still 17 years old. The driver, Larry Dean Thompson, was 46. When Thompson tried to leave the area, a struggle began. During that moment, Medina fired one round toward the driver. Thompson did not survive. Medina fled the scene but was located and taken into custody a short time later. He was charged under a specific Colorado law. That law states that if someone commits a serious illegal act and it results in a person losing their life, they can face the most severe charges, even if the result was not intended. At trial, prosecutors presented footage from the store's security camera, which showed Medina approaching and confronting the driver. A store employee testified about what they witnessed. First responders described what they saw at the scene. Experts confirmed that the injury caused by the shot was the direct reason for the outcome. The defense focused on his age. They said he panicked and made a reckless choice. They didn't bring in witnesses to claim the driver had acted aggressively beforehand. Instead, they asked the jury to consider the possibility that he hadn't meant for things to go that far. Still, the jury found him responsible under the state's law. At the time, anyone under 18 who was tried as an adult for this charge automatically received a life sentence with no chance of early release. On June 10, 1999, the judge delivered the sentence. Medina was transferred to an adult facility. He was still just 17. During sentencing, he spoke quietly. He said he never wanted anyone to lose their life. He only wanted to escape the situation. Those were the only words he shared in court. They reflected a mix of regret and the heavy reality of what had happened. As of mid-2025, Andrew Medina is still being held at Colorado State Penitentiary. Evan Miller was born sometime around 1988 or 1989, though exact records aren't available. By July 2003, he was 14 years old. His early life was marked by hardship. He spent time in foster care and had tried to harm himself multiple times, starting as young as 6. His stepfather treated him unkindly, and his mother struggled with addiction. Evan lacked a stable and supportive home environment throughout his childhood. One evening in late summer in the small town of Moulton, Alabama, 14-year-old Evan and his 16-year-old friend Colby Smith were at Evan's trailer home along with their 52-year-old neighbor, Cole Cannon. That night, Cannon provided substances to the teens, and they spent the evening smoking and playing drinking games. Eventually, Cannon fell asleep on the couch. Later that night, Evan and Colby returned to Cannon's trailer with the intent to take money. Evan grabbed Cannon's wallet, which had around $300 inside. When Cannon woke up and moved toward him, Colby used a baseball bat to strike him. Evan also hit Cannon and later used the bat himself. Before delivering the final blow, Evan placed a sheet over Cannon's head and made statements suggesting he believed he had some higher purpose, clearly showing an intent to cause harm. Cannon was left injured on the floor. The teens left, then returned a short time later. They attempted to clean the scene and then set the trailer on fire while Cannon was still inside. Emergency crews arrived, but it was too late. Cannon had not survived the injuries and the fire. Mental health evaluations later revealed that Evan had endured years of mistreatment, neglect, and emotional distress. His legal team argued that his actions at 14 were shaped by the instability and trauma he had experienced. Evan was charged in adult court for the fatal outcome connected to the fire. He was found responsible. On October 20th, 2006, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release, in line with state laws at the time. Colby Smith, his co-defendant, accepted a plea deal and received a sentence that allowed for future review. Their cases led to very different outcomes. Evan's case eventually reached the U.S. Supreme Court and resulted in a major 2012 ruling, Miller v. Alabama. The court ruled that automatically giving life without release sentences to minors violated constitutional protections. The decision emphasized that courts must consider a young person's age, background, and potential for growth when deciding their sentence. In March 2017, Evan was granted a new sentencing hearing. He gave a prepared statement expressing remorse to Cannon's family, saying he knew he had taken away their happiness. Prosecutors noted that Evan had behaved well in prison. He worked in a trusted unit and learned welding. Despite this, in April 2021, the judge upheld the life without release sentence, stating that Evan had not shown enough change to justify a different outcome. Evan has appealed that decision and remains in custody. Next, meet a teenager whose dark online persona spiraled into something even darker. Ashley Martinson was born in 1998 in the United States. Online, she went by the nickname Vampchick and ran a blog focused on horror stories. Friends described her as quiet and creative, with a strong interest in dark fiction. But behind that calm exterior, she was facing serious problems at home. She lived with her mother, Jennifer Ayers, her stepfather, Thomas Tony Ayers, and several younger half and stepsisters. Around age 16, the family moved to a remote area in Oneida County, Wisconsin. Her biological father was not involved in her life. Thomas had a criminal past that included serious offenses and mistreatment of family members. Despite restrictions, he kept multiple loaded firearms in the house. Relatives later testified that he regularly used physical discipline on Jennifer and the younger children. Some claimed he once forced the kids to watch as he harmed baby animals, then fed the remains to wild animals nearby. Ashley later revealed that a former partner of her mother's had subjected her to inappropriate and harmful behavior starting at age 9. She said she endured years of emotional and physical mistreatment, leaving her with symptoms of depression and trauma-related stress. On March 7, 2015, just one day after turning 17, Ashley's mother and stepfather discovered she had been secretly dating a 22-year-old named Ryan Sisko. They took her phone and car keys. That evening, she posted online that she wanted to end her stepfather's life. The following morning, after witnessing him mistreat her mother again, she said she felt overwhelmed and hopeless. She locked herself in her room with one of his shotguns. Ashley later said she had intended to harm herself, but when Thomas began banging on her door, she feared he would take the gun and use it against her. In that moment of fear, she fired 2 rounds through the door, striking him fatally. Her mother then entered the room holding a sharp object and yelling. Ashley said she acted in panic and self-defense, hitting her mother multiple times, over 30, according to records. She then locked her younger sisters in a separate room, gave them snacks, turned on a movie, and left the home with her boyfriend Ryan. The next day, police in Indiana found and arrested both of them. Ashley was charged as an adult with 2 counts related to the loss of life and 1 count of restricting her sister's movement. At her first hearing, she pleaded not guilty and argued that her mental health at the time should be considered. 2 court-appointed professionals evaluated her. Both agreed that she had signs of post-traumatic stress and depression, but also stated that she understood her actions and had control over her behavior. Prosecutors later admitted they could not fully argue that she acted without serious provocation. Under Wisconsin law, that allowed the charges to be reduced to a lesser form of intentional harm. In April 2016, Ashley accepted a plea deal and admitted guilt. Prosecutors requested a 40-year sentence, while her defense asked for just 8. In June, Judge Michael Bloom sentenced her to 23 years in prison, followed by 17 years of supervision. He acknowledged the trauma she had endured, but said the actions were still intentional and very serious. Ashley later appealed, saying the judge's comment that she had a choice didn't match the idea that she acted under intense pressure. The appeals court reviewed the case and upheld both the conviction and sentence. She is now serving her sentence at Techita Correctional Institution in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. While incarcerated, she earned her high school diploma. In later interviews, Ashley said she feels safe and, for the first time in her life, a sense of peace. Chloe Copeland Anderson grew up in Gordon, Nebraska, a quiet town where most neighbors know each other by name. From an early age, she experienced mistreatment from certain family members. This left emotional scars that she carried with her for years. Later in court, her defense explained that Chloe had long struggled with unaddressed mental health challenges. These included symptoms consistent with trauma-related stress and major depression. Her legal team argued that these conditions played a significant role in what would happen later. On November 6, 2023, Chloe was 16 years old. That day, she quietly gave birth in her bedroom. No one in her household, neither her parents nor siblings, had any idea she was expecting. After the delivery, Chloe went into the kitchen and picked up a sharp object. In what her attorneys described as a deeply distressed mental state, she used it to harm the newborn. The child did not survive. He was later found wrapped in a towel with injuries to his upper body. The community was left asking, why did she keep her pregnancy and the birth a secret? Based on evidence and statements, the likely answer was fear. She may have been terrified of judgment, rejection, or possible punishment. Investigators believed she felt entirely alone. Emergency responders were called after Chloe's father made the discovery. At first, he believed the child had passed naturally. But when Chloe's mother saw the marks, she became visibly upset and reportedly said she hurt him, referring to the injuries. The object used had been hidden. Later, Chloe's father found it tucked away in her bedroom closet, showing visible red stains. Chloe was taken into custody and charged with multiple serious offenses, including causing the loss of a child and using a dangerous object. The case shocked the community and made national headlines. In August 2024, Chloe agreed to a plea deal. She entered a no-contest plea to a second-degree charge. As a result, the most severe original charges, including one involving mistreatment of a minor, were dropped. Her legal team emphasized her age and fragile emotional state in hopes the court would consider her past. On April 24, 2025, Judge Travis O'Gorman sentenced her to a term of 35 to 60 years in prison. Because Chloe had already spent over 500 days in custody, that time was subtracted from the sentence. She will not be eligible for parole until she reaches her early 50s. Although prosecutors could have pursued a more severe sentence, the court accepted the agreement, citing her age and long-standing mental health history as contributing factors. Later reports revealed that Chloe had delivered the baby at just 15 years old. The child's father was 19. Under Nebraska law, that age difference is not permitted and is classified as a serious offense. Chloe had never confided in anyone about the pregnancy. She gave birth alone, without any support or medical care. Her legal team said years of unresolved trauma and mental health issues led her to disconnect from reality. They argued she was emotionally unequipped to handle the situation when it happened. Chloe Copeland Anderson is currently serving her sentence in a Nebraska correctional facility. Unless future legal changes occur, she won't be eligible for release until sometime in her early 50s. Christine Paolilla was born in 1986 in Long Island, New York. Her early life was marked by hardship. When she was just 2 years old, her father, Charles Paolilla, passed away due to a construction-related incident. Afterward, her mother, Lori, began struggling with substance issues, leading to Christine and her brother being placed in the care of their grandparents. As a child, Christine faced medical challenges. She was diagnosed with alopecia, a condition that caused her to lose all her hair, including her eyebrows and eyelashes. She wore wigs and large glasses, which made her the target of frequent bullying at school. Eventually, her mother recovered, remarried, and the family relocated to Clear Lake City, Texas, near Houston. Christine enrolled at Clear Lake High School, where she remained shy at first. That changed when two popular classmates, Tiffany Rowell and Rachel Kolarutis, welcomed her into their friend group. Christine's self-confidence improved and her appearance began to change. In 2003, her classmates even voted her Miss Irresistible. That same year, Christine started a relationship with 21-year-old Christopher Snyder. According to Christine's mother, the relationship was unhealthy. Snyder had a history of legal issues and substance use. He reportedly isolated Christine from friends and family and became controlling over time. One afternoon in 2003, Christine and Snyder visited Tiffany's home in Clear Lake City. Inside were Tiffany, her boyfriend Marcus Priscilla, Rachel, and Marcus's cousin Adalbert Sanchez. Reports later stated that the visit may have involved the planned exchange of illegal substances, as Marcus and Adalbert were believed to be involved in that activity. According to authorities, a dispute broke out between Snyder and Marcus. Snyder pulled out a firearm and began shooting. Two different weapons were used, a 9mm semi-automatic and a .38 revolver. More than 40 rounds were fired. All four individuals in the home were struck multiple times. Rachel attempted to reach a phone but was stopped. Christine allegedly returned to the room at that moment. Witnesses later said she used the revolver to strike Rachel and then fired again. Christine's future husband, Justin Rott, said she later told him she had seen someone still moving and used the weapon again. Within an hour, Christine clocked in for her shift at Walgreens and acted as if nothing had happened. Authorities believe the motive stemmed from the failed exchange and a possible attempt to take what was inside the home. While Snyder was viewed as the one who started the incident, Christine made no attempt to walk away. Instead, evidence suggested she actively took part. She later told investigators that Snyder forced her inside and made her hold a weapon, but physical evidence did not match that claim. With little evidence left behind, the case went cold for nearly 3 years. In July 2005, Christine, by then married and using illegal substances, saw a news report about the case. She confessed everything to her husband, Justin Rott, who later informed law enforcement. On July 8, 2006, an anonymous tip named Christine and Snyder as suspects. It's widely believed Justin was the one who called it in. Christine was arrested on July 19, 2006. in San Antonio, where authorities also found a large amount of illegal items. Snyder had already left for South Carolina. Days later, he ended his life after learning there was a warrant for his arrest. Christine's trial began in fall 2008. Prosecutors described the act as cold and calculated. They said Rachel's last words were a plea. "Why are you doing this to me?" before she was harmed again. The prosecution argued that Christine was an active participant and helped carry out the plan. Her defense claimed she had been manipulated by Snyder and was terrified. They also argued her confession came while she was going through withdrawal, but the jury rejected that defense. On October 13, 2008, Christine was found guilty on 4 capital-related counts. Because she was under 18 at the time, Texas law prevented the harshest penalty. She was sentenced to life in prison the next day. Christine later appealed her case, claiming the bond was excessive and that key evidence had been excluded. But in 2011, the court upheld the verdict and sentence. Today, Christine is housed at the Christina Melton Crane Unit in Gatesville, Texas. She will be eligible to apply for parole in July 2046 after serving at least 40 years. Heidi Dutton was adopted as an infant by Deborah and Larry Dutton. They lived in Dewey, Oklahoma, and were known by many as a loving and devoted family. Deborah, who was 67, had served as a staff sergeant in the U.S. Air Force before later becoming a chef. Larry, 73, had also been in the Air Force, where he reached the rank of Master Staff Sergeant. After retiring, he worked as an airport manager in Kansas. They raised Heidi with deep care, always treating her as their own child. Friends, neighbors, and relatives spoke highly of the Duttons, describing them as generous and kind-hearted. Just a year before everything changed, Heidi had earned the rank of Eagle Scout, an achievement her parents were incredibly proud of, but in December 2022, everything shifted. Heidi was 17 years old when investigators say she began forming a dangerous plan. Instead of gratitude, she reportedly told someone close to her that she wanted her adoptive parents out of her life. She later acknowledged having those thoughts. Heidi shared this with her boyfriend, 22-year-old Lucas Walker. On the night of December 19th, Walker entered her parents' home without their permission. He had taken a .22 caliber firearm from their garage. When Deborah opened her bedroom door, Walker used the weapon against her. Then he used a sharp object. Larry heard the noise and rushed to help. The weapon malfunctioned, so Walker used the same sharp object to hurt Larry as well, leaving injuries to his upper body. According to court documents, this wasn't a random or sudden act. The events were planned in advance. Heidi had expressed her wishes and Walker followed through. Afterward, they used bed sheets to move the bodies. Security footage from a doorbell camera later captured them placing the remains in shallow areas in the backyard. They tried to clean the scene using bleach and other products, but traces of red staining were eventually discovered beneath the flooring. Nearly a month went by. On January 20th, 2023, neighbors who hadn't seen the couple in a while contacted law enforcement for a wellness check. When deputies arrived, they found Heidi and Walker still inside the home. Something immediately seemed off. Strong chemical smells filled the air. Stains were visible near the baseboards, and the backyard soil had clearly been disturbed. During interviews, both Heidi and Walker described what had taken place. Walker admitted he was the one who carried it out. Heidi confessed she had planned the entire thing. The revelation shocked the community. Many couldn't understand how a teenager raised with so much support could be involved in something so extreme. By May 2025, Heidi was 19 years old. She pleaded guilty to 2 counts related to premeditated action, 1 count of conspiracy, and 2 counts of improperly handling remains after the incident. She chose to have her case decided by a judge rather than a jury. On June 6, 2025, a judge in Washington County followed a jury's sentencing recommendation and gave her life in prison. Under state guidelines, she must serve at least 85% of a 45-year sentence before she can apply for parole, meaning she will not be eligible for release for nearly 38 years. Lucas Walker was tried in federal court because of his Cherokee Nation status. He accepted a plea for second-degree involvement and was given a 35-year sentence. Frederick Jackson was born on July 11, 2004, in Arkansas. According to local sources, his early life was filled with challenges. Between 2015 and 2018, he came to the attention of authorities on at least 7 separate occasions. At just 11 years old, he threatened to strike an assistant principal. By 14, he had been involved in multiple altercations at school that left other students hurt. His record as a minor included citations for disorderly behavior, third-degree physical misconduct, and possession of stolen items. His home life was marked by significant personal loss. In 2019, his uncle, Bradley Blackshear, passed away following an encounter with a police officer in Little Rock. Just a year later, in 2020, his mother, who was pregnant at the time, also lost her life in a shooting. These events had a major emotional impact on Jackson, though they do not excuse what followed. On June 2nd, 2020, when Jackson was 15, he was involved in a shooting that took the life of Nicholas Jones. Less than 2 weeks later, on June 15th, he was involved in another shooting that ended the life of Deshaun Allen. Many wondered why another act followed so quickly. Some experts suggest that when warning signs in teens go unaddressed, the behavior can escalate rapidly. Then, on February 20th, 2021, at age 16, Jackson was involved in another incident, this time involving Dante Stanley. A disagreement reportedly led to the confrontation, which may have stemmed from local tensions or a personal conflict. At that point, Jackson was already linked to 2 earlier cases but continued down the same path. The final known event occurred on April 7, 2022, when Jackson was 17. He was involved in a shooting that ended the life of Dolan Goff. He was taken into custody 5 days later on April 12th. In the aftermath, many questioned what led him to take such repeated actions. Some pointed to impulsive decision-making common among teens, while others highlighted pressure from peers or the surrounding environment. Ongoing grief, personal losses, and struggles with authority likely shaped his mindset. Following his arrest, Jackson was formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree unlawful loss of life and 4 counts of illegal firearm possession. His legal case stretched over many months. In January 2024, Jackson entered guilty pleas for all charges. The local district attorney described his actions as tragic and avoidable, and emphasized the importance of early intervention for at-risk youth. By admitting guilt, Jackson avoided a full jury trial, likely in hopes of reducing the harshest possible sentence. On January 10, 2024, the court sentenced him to 50 years in the Arkansas correctional system. Based on the current timeline, he may be eligible for review of his case beginning May 15, 2057. Now, what kind of rage brews behind straight A's and ends in a mother's final breath? Carly Madison. Greg was just 14 years old, a top student in Brandon, Mississippi. She lived with her mom, stepdad, and younger siblings. She was gifted, so much so that she had skipped a grade. From the outside, everything looked perfectly normal. But that changed on March 19, 2024. Her mother, Ashley Smiley, was 40 and worked as a high school math teacher. Her stepfather, Heath Smiley, was 39 and deeply devoted to the family. Carly's biological father, Kevin Gregg, had little involvement in her life. After everything unfolded, he described it as shameful and heartbreaking. That afternoon, Ashley came home from school and noticed signs that Carly had possibly been using substances. She also found extra phones hidden around the house. Something about that discovery escalated the situation. Security footage later showed Carly grabbing a .357 Magnum. She followed her mother into the bedroom. What happened next would leave the community in shock. 3 shots, each aimed directly. Why did it happen? Was it a moment of emotional overload? Some believed it was retaliation. Prosecutors said it was premeditated. They argued that Ashley's discovery triggered a series of calculated choices, not a spontaneous outburst. Afterward, Carly walked into the kitchen, calmly petted her dogs, and sent a text to her stepdad. She even moved a security camera into the refrigerator to avoid being recorded. One of her messages read, "When will you be home, honey?" Heath rushed back immediately. Almost at the same time, Carly's friend BW, a 16-year-old, arrived at the house. Carly greeted her without emotion and asked, "Have you ever seen someone who's gone?" She then led her friend to the bedroom. Just then, Heath came through the door. Carly fired again and grazed his shoulder. He managed to disarm her and, in tears, called 911. He told the dispatcher that Carly was responsible for what had happened to Ashley. The trial began in mid-September 2024. Prosecutors pointed to every detail as proof of intent: retrieving the gun, hiding the camera, texting Heath, inviting a friend. They declined a plea deal that would have resulted in a 40-year sentence. They said life without parole was more appropriate. Carly's defense argued that she had been in a psychological crisis. A psychiatrist testified that she had been diagnosed with depression, had a history of self-harm, and claimed to hear voices. The expert said Carly had no memory of what happened, but the prosecution pointed to her composed behavior as evidence she knew exactly what she was doing. Another expert described the act as calculated, dismissing any claims of emotional instability as a defense. After only about 2 hours, the jury delivered its decision. Carly was found guilty of first-degree unlawful loss of life, attempted harm, and tampering with evidence. Sentencing took place immediately after. The judge gave Carly life without the possibility of release for both the loss of life and the act against Heath. An additional 10 years were added for tampering. All sentences will run at the same time. When the sentence was announced, Carly broke down in tears. District Attorney Bubba Bramlett told reporters, This was an unbelievably cruel act. She's 15 and you hate to see it, but prison is exactly where she belongs. Ruth Ann Veal was born in 1978. Her early years were marked by a troubled home life. She experienced serious mistreatment and was placed in various youth facilities multiple times. By her early teens, she had already lived in around 11 different homes due to worsening behavior. Because of this instability, she was often described as a repeat offender. Court records don't offer many details about her parents, but the challenges in her home environment were brought up repeatedly during later appeals. Still, those factors didn't change the outcome of her original trial. On the night of June 15, 1993, everything changed. Veal had left a youth group home in Waterloo without permission. A police vehicle spotted her and began a pursuit, but she managed to escape by slipping into a garage. From there, she quietly entered the nearby home of 66-year-old Catherine Haynes, a retired librarian, through an unlocked door. The house was dark and quiet. Inside, Veal took a kitchen tool from the counter and hid behind a spare bedroom door. When Haynes entered the room, Veal jumped out. She struck her a total of 23 times in the head, neck, and torso. The blow was powerful enough to cause the blade to snap. Haynes suffered multiple broken ribs and defensive wounds. One injury nearly severed her ring finger. Investigators said Veal's actions showed planning and intent. She waited quietly, with a weapon in hand, and delivered multiple strikes in quick succession. After Haynes collapsed, Veal covered her with a bedspread. She then took the victim's credit cards, made long-distance calls using her phone, and drove away in her car. Over the next 3 days, Veal traveled across Waterloo, Cedar Rapids, and Iowa City, using the cards to shop. Haynes's body was found on the afternoon of June 16th. Police began investigating tips from the public, including one from a friend's grandmother. Veal was arrested on June 17th. Though she was just 14 at the time, Veal was charged as an adult under Iowa law. The case was moved to Black Hawk County for trial. Her defense attorneys requested a new location due to media attention and also raised concerns about jury selection and bias. The original judge stepped down, but the new judge denied most of their requests. Within 3 weeks, a jury found Veal guilty of first-degree unlawful loss of life. The prosecution described her actions as an aggressive break-in followed by an armed theft, driven by anger and personal gain. Her attorneys argued that her age and traumatic upbringing should be taken into account, but the court did not accept those arguments. On November 13, 1995, Veal was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the time, she was 17. Iowa law mandated that sentence for first-degree cases with no room for alternatives. The judge gave a strong rebuke of her actions and pointed out her lack of visible remorse. Years later, her legal team appealed under the Eighth Amendment. They referred to U.S. Supreme Court rulings that found mandatory life without parole sentences for minors unconstitutional. In 2010, Iowa's Supreme Court allowed her to bring this argument forward. By December 2013, she was given a new sentence, life in prison with a chance of parole. This revision gave her a slim opportunity to be reviewed for future release. By the time she was 35, she had already spent over 20 years in prison. Her appeal was supported by the Equal Justice Initiative. Meanwhile, Catherine Haynes's family gave victim impact statements, describing how their loss had affected them over the years. There's no public record of what Veal said when she was first sentenced or arrested. But at her 2013 resentencing, she spoke to Haynes's daughter, saying, "I'm sorry for any pain that I have caused your family. I would like to say to my family, sorry for everything you're going through. I am." To this day, Ruth Ann Veal remains one of only 2 14-year-olds in Iowa history to receive a life sentence without parole. Rachel Marie Wade was born in 1990 in Pinellas Park, Florida. Her parents, Barry and Janet Wade, raised her in what appeared to be a typical family environment. As a teen, Rachel often pushed boundaries. By the time she was 15, she had started running away and clashing with her parents. During those times, they occasionally contacted law enforcement for help. Eventually, Rachel moved out and got her own apartment. She worked as a server at Applebee's. Everything began to change when she met Josh Camacho, who was working at Chick-fil-A at the time. Rachel started seeing Josh, but he soon began spending time with another girl, Sarah Ludeman. Sarah, born December 7, 1990, was a high-achieving high school student with dreams of becoming a veterinarian. Her parents, Gay and Charlie Ludeman, were protective and close to her. Soon, Rachel, Sarah, and another young woman who was expecting a child with Josh found themselves caught in a tense and emotional triangle. Rachel and Sarah discovered each other's connection to Josh through social media. Rachel posted pictures with Josh. Sarah replied online. Tensions escalated quickly. Both began leaving heated voicemails for one another, and social media became a public battleground. Eventually, the online tension turned into real-world confrontation. Sarah and her friends began teasing Rachel during her restaurant shifts, tripping her, knocking trays, even performing the song Girl Fight during karaoke. On one occasion, Sarah followed Rachel in a car and sprayed her with silly string to embarrass her. On the evening of April 14, 2009, Rachel was home alone with her dog. She said she heard a car horn outside and Sarah's voice yelling. Feeling panicked, Rachel grabbed a kitchen tool and called an ex-boyfriend, Javier Laboy, who told her to meet him. At the same time, Sarah was hanging out at Josh's house playing video games. Around 11 p.m., Rachel sent Josh a message. "Now I know why you're not talking to me, because you got her." Josh responded, "That's right. I don't like you anymore. Why don't you go home?" Rachel replied, "No, I'll wait for her to go home." Witnesses later testified that Rachel made threatening calls to both Sarah and Josh that night. Just before midnight, Sarah was getting ready to leave. Josh's sister asked for a ride to McDonald's, but a friend warned Sarah that Rachel was with Javier. Sarah decided to go see Rachel instead of heading home. On the way there, Rachel allegedly called again, saying she planned to confront Sarah directly. When Sarah pulled into Javier's driveway, the situation quickly escalated. Rachel claimed Sarah jumped out of her vehicle swinging and nearly hit her with the van. Rachel said she felt threatened and acted in fear. But witnesses described Rachel walking towards Sarah and striking first. One injury was especially severe and caused Sarah to collapse. After the incident, witnesses say Rachel tossed the kitchen tool over a neighbor's fence and said, "I'm done." Sarah managed to return to her car and called for help, saying she was hurt. She was rushed to Northside Hospital but passed away early the next morning, April 15, 2009. Rachel was arrested just hours later and charged with a second-degree felony. She was held in the Pinellas County Jail with bonds set at $500,000 while awaiting trial. Her trial began on July 20, 2010 and was covered heavily by the media, including segments on True TV and CNN. Prosecutors described Rachel as jealous and upset. They pointed to months of threats, social media disputes, and confrontations as proof she had planned the encounter. They said she brought a weapon with full intent. Her defense argued that she was scared and acted without premeditation. They cited earlier incidents where Sarah and others had targeted her, including at Rachel's workplace. The defense claimed she was cornered and reacted. One of the most significant pieces of evidence came from voicemails Rachel had left Sarah, messages that included angry and aggressive warnings. The courtroom went silent as those recordings played. After 2.5 hours of deliberation, the jury, 5 men and 1 woman, found Rachel guilty of second-degree charges on July 23, 2010. On September 3, 2010, Judge Joseph Bilone sentenced her to 27 years in prison. He said her actions showed intent and did not fit a case of self-defense. The sentencing drew strong reactions. Teens supporting both sides cried, and some shouted. Judge Bilone remarked that the entire situation reflected a lack of maturity from everyone involved. Rachel appealed the conviction, but the court upheld it in February 2012. In a 2011 interview, she said social media had escalated the conflict and allowed people to lash out in ways they wouldn't in person. Rachel Wade is currently serving her sentence at Lowell Correctional Institution in Florida. Her scheduled release date is March 21, 2032. Tiffany Vanelstein was a teenager living in Knox, a small community in Albany County, New York. She shared a modest trailer on Thatcher Park Road with her mother, Brenda. In September 2014, Brenda agreed to care for 3 young children, 5-year-old Kenneth White, his twin sister, and their younger sibling, after the children's biological parents lost custody due to unsafe home conditions. While Brenda was at work or running errands, Tiffany was left in charge of the kids. The trailer was cramped, with Tiffany, her mom, the 3 children, a family friend, and several animals all sharing the space. At the same time, Tiffany was dealing with growing mental health struggles. She had been prescribed medication for a condition that wasn't fully diagnosed and had recently stopped attending therapy. On December 18, 2014, Brenda was out, and Tiffany was alone with Kenneth and his sisters. She was trying to help Kenneth with flashcards, but he kept getting the answers wrong. Her frustration escalated. In that moment, she lost control, blocking his airways and causing injury to his head. Later, Tiffany told investigators that she acted in anger and didn't clearly remember the moment things turned fatal. When Kenneth became unresponsive, panic set in. She carried him across the road, left him in a snowbank, and covered him before going back inside. Tiffany then created a false story. She called emergency services and claimed that 2 masked intruders had broken in, restrained her, and taken Kenneth. She even damaged the trailer door with a hammer to support her story. Authorities quickly launched a search, but her version didn't match the evidence. Within an hour, a police dog traced Kenneth's location to the snowbank across the street. He was found unresponsive. Medical findings later confirmed he had stopped breathing due to forceful restraint and head trauma. The next day, on December 19, 2014, Tiffany was taken into custody. She was charged in Knoxtown Court with 2 counts of second-degree taking a life and 1 count of first-degree unlawful harm. She entered a plea of not guilty at her arraignment. Her legal team raised concerns that media coverage might influence a potential jury. A grand jury later returned a formal indictment with multiple counts, including charges based on emotional disturbance and disregard for safety. In November 2015, Tiffany accepted a plea deal. She admitted guilt to 1 count of second-degree charges under the extreme indifference standard. The agreement capped her sentence at 18 years to life, rather than risking a longer term of 25 years to life. On January 14, 2016, Judge Stephen Herrick handed down the sentence. He described Tiffany as a time bomb waiting to go off, referencing her mental health history and lack of support. In court, Tiffany spoke with visible remorse. "Those kids meant everything to me, and I loved them very much. Kenneth was my little buddy, and he'll always be in my heart. I'm so sorry for what I did. I wish I could take it back, but I can't." She also admitted that she kept up the false story even after hearing faint noises from Kenneth in the snowbank. She said fear and panic drove her to lie. The case led Albany County to review how it responds to urgent child safety concerns. A new law was passed allowing faster access to child protection records during emergencies. Kenneth's sisters were moved out of the home and placed in foster care. Family court later determined that the environment was unsafe. Several years later, both girls were adopted by their foster parent. Tyler Witt was born in 1994 and raised in El Dorado Hills, California, by her mother, Joanne Witt, who worked as an assistant engineer for the county. In her early years, Tyler was described as kind and well-behaved. Joanne supported her daughter's hobbies, paying for horseback riding lessons, and the two often bonded over cooking and watching movies together. But as Tyler entered her teenage years, their relationship began to break down. Arguments became frequent, and their home life turned tense and sometimes confrontational. Stephen Culver was born in 1989. He started a relationship with Tyler when he was 19 years old. Joanne initially disapproved due to the age gap. This created growing strain in the household, but despite her concerns, Joanne eventually allowed Stephen to stay in their home. Tyler had told her that Stephen was just a close friend and identified as gay. Joanne believed her, thinking there was no danger, and agreed to let him live with them. Then in June 2009, the quiet community of El Dorado Hills was shaken by a devastating event involving 47-year-old Joanne Witt. Tyler, who was 14 at the time, and Stephen were at the center of it. Joanne had recently found Tyler's personal journal, which detailed her connection with Stephen. Disturbed by what she read, Joanne contacted authorities, reporting an inappropriate relationship between an adult and a minor. Feeling desperate and unwilling to be separated, Tyler and Stephen made a plan to prevent Joanne from testifying. They drew inspiration from tragic romantic tales, imagining themselves as star-crossed lovers. On the night of June 11th, Tyler added sleeping medication to her mother's drink. Once Joanne fell asleep, Stephen entered the bedroom. The two acted together, and Joanne lost her life after being harmed multiple times. She never woke up. Afterward, Tyler and Stephen fled to San Francisco. They brought poison and mixed it into food, planning to end their own lives. Joanne's co-workers grew concerned when she didn't report to work. On June 13th, deputies visited her home and discovered her body. Investigators immediately turned their focus to Tyler and Stephen. On June 16th, the pair were found at a shopping center in San Bruno. Police recovered handwritten notes about their plan, along with the food mixture they had prepared. During early questioning, Tyler denied involvement. Stephen, however, appeared more focused on Tyler's future than his own. Eventually, Tyler accepted a plea agreement. She admitted to second-degree involvement and agreed to testify against Stephen. In return, she received a sentence of 15 years to life. In court, she claimed she couldn't bring herself to harm her mother and that Stephen was responsible. Stephen claimed the opposite, saying Tyler had acted first. The jury sided with the view that Stephen had carried out a deliberate and planned act. He received life in prison with no chance for early release. In August 2022, after serving about 13 years, Tyler was granted parole. Stephen remains in custody, with no eligibility for release. Charles Starkweather was born on November 24, 1938, in Lincoln, Nebraska. He was the third of 7 siblings in a working-class household. Life presented challenges early on. He dealt with a speech difficulty and was often teased by classmates. Charles idolized actor James Dean and gradually began adopting his rebellious look and attitude. Carol Ann Fugate was born 5 years later on July 30th, 1943, also in Lincoln. She met Charles in 1956 when she was just 13 years old. The two began seeing each other shortly after. Over time, their relationship grew more intense and more one-sided. Charles became increasingly controlling and possessive. Then, in the winter of 1958, everything changed. At ages 19 and 14, Charles and Carol began a chain of events that would leave a lasting mark on American history. Over the span of several days, 11 lives were lost across Nebraska and Wyoming. The turning point came on January 21, 1958. Charles arrived at Carol's home and got into a heated confrontation with her mother and stepfather. The encounter ended fatally. Then Carol's 2-year-old half-sister also lost her life. Charles later claimed that Carol supported his actions. Carol said she was forced to stay quiet and wasn't allowed to leave. In the days that followed, the pair moved from town to town, leaving behind more victims. Over the course of a week, their actions left entire communities shaken. Their time on the run ended on January 29, 1958. By then, the pair had traveled hundreds of miles, switching vehicles and leaving fear behind them. That day, near Douglas, Wyoming, they encountered a local man named Merle Collison. When they attempted to take his vehicle, things quickly fell apart. Charles couldn't operate the car's controls. A passing motorist stopped to assist, but sensed something was off. Charles pulled a weapon, but the man managed to disarm him. Police arrived moments later. Charles fled in another stolen car, leading officers on a high-speed pursuit. The chase ended outside town when shots were fired at his vehicle, forcing him to stop. He surrendered and was taken into custody. Carol was located shortly after. She told authorities she had been held against her will. Investigators weren't convinced. They pointed out that she had multiple opportunities to escape or ask for help, but never did. Her actions during the week were a key part of the trial. Charles was prosecuted for the case of Robert Jensen and found guilty. He received capital punishment and was executed using the electric method on June 25, 1959. He made no final public statement. In private notes to his parents, he showed no remorse. Carol faced trial next. Charles testified that she had willingly taken part in everything. That testimony played a major role in how the jury saw her. Her claim that she was forced was rejected, and she was sentenced to life in prison. After serving 17 years, Carol was granted parole in 1976. She later moved to Michigan and has kept a low profile ever since. Her case remains the subject of ongoing debate. Some argue she was unfairly blamed. Others believe she was fully aware and responsible for her role in what happened. In January 2005, 16-year-old Adrienne Reynolds disappeared in East Moline, Illinois. At first, her family and friends had no idea what happened, but the truth would eventually point to two of her classmates, Sarah Kolb and Corey Gregory. What began as a typical teen conflict quickly turned into something far more serious. Sarah was 16 at the time and lived with her mother and stepfather in Milan, Illinois. At the Black Hawk College Outreach Center, she carried herself with confidence, and some students saw her as well-liked. But behind the scenes, Sarah had a pattern of making concerning remarks. Most people didn't believe she'd ever act on them. Corey, who was 17, had recently transferred from Moline High School and lived with his mother. That's where he met Sarah, who soon started calling him her best friend. Corey was soft-spoken, and many believed Sarah had a strong influence over him. On January 21st, Sarah invited Adrienne to grab lunch at a Taco Bell. Corey came along, as did another classmate, Sean McKittrick. During the meal, Sarah and Adrienne had an argument. Sean later said he felt uneasy and decided to leave early. Once back in the parking lot, the situation escalated. Investigators later said that Corey held Adrienne down while Sarah used a belt, resulting in her passing. Afterward, Sarah and Corey drove to Sarah's grandparents' farm in Aledo, Illinois. There, they attempted to destroy evidence using gasoline, but the attempt failed. They then contacted 16-year-old Nathan Godet. Nathan used a saw from his grandfather's workshop to dismember Adrienne's body. The group placed the remains into trash bags and later disposed of them at Black Hawk State Historic Site. Adrienne's parents contacted law enforcement when she didn't come home or show up for her shift at Checkers. On January 26th, Corey confessed and led police to the site where her remains were found. Both he and Sarah were arrested and charged with first-degree charges and concealment of evidence. Sarah's first trial began in October 2005, but the jury couldn't reach a verdict, resulting in a mistrial. A second trial was held in February 2006. This time, the jury found her guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 48 years for the act and an additional 5 years for the cover-up, served consecutively. In July 2006, Corey also pleaded guilty. He was given a total of 45 years, 40 for the crime and 5 for concealment. In 2022, Corey, now known as Harley Quinn, returned to court after a ruling that the original sentence may have been too harsh for a minor. The court reviewed the case and reissued the same 45-year sentence. At that hearing, Harley addressed the courtroom saying, "If I could give my life, I would. I'm sorry, I know it doesn't make a difference. I know you'll never forgive me, and I'd never ask because I don't deserve it." Sarah has also requested a reduced sentence, claiming she was still a child and capable of change. However, the court upheld her full sentence, citing the premeditated nature of the plan and her continued lack of visible remorse. Chelsea Ann Marie Shipp grew up in the quiet town of Winnie, Texas. Details about her childhood are limited. Public records don't paint a full picture of how she was raised or what influenced her early years. But by her late 20s, Chelsea had become entangled in a volatile love triangle, one that would lead to devastating consequences. At age 28, she split her time between Southeast Texas and the Gulf Coast, sometimes working with friends like Brandy Moon cleaning vacation rentals. From the outside, her life seemed ordinary, but beneath the surface, tension was building. Chelsea had developed relationships with 2 people, Cody Arnold, 22, and Caitlin Nicole Stone, who was just 16. Cody lived with Caitlin, but continued seeing Chelsea on the side. Witnesses later described growing jealousy in the weeks leading up to the tragedy, fueled by rumors that Caitlin might be pregnant and that Cody could be the father. By March of 2022, things had spiraled. Both Chelsea and Cody were reportedly using substances. The lines between their relationships had blurred, and emotions were running high. On the night of March the 26th, at Cody's home in Jefferson County, Texas, Caitlin had fallen asleep. Cody later told investigators that he had left the room briefly. When he came back, Chelsea was holding a firearm. A single shot was fired. Caitlin did not survive. Officers later discovered shell casings on the pillow next to Caitlin. Her body had been wrapped in a blanket, then placed inside a trash bag and left on the bed, an apparent attempt to cover up what had happened. The next day, March the 27th, Chelsea made a startling confession to a friend. She said just 4 words, "I shot her. She's gone." That friend immediately contacted law enforcement. Deputies arrived at Cody's home and found everything as Chelsea had described: the blanket, the bag, and Caitlin's body. When questioned, Chelsea said she was afraid that Cody might get in trouble because of Caitlin's age. She claimed Cody had warned her, saying, "You're going to get in trouble for getting her pregnant." A grand jury later indicted both Chelsea and Cody. Chelsea was charged with taking a life, while Cody faced charges related to not reporting the incident and giving false statements to authorities. Both were held on a $1 million bond. Chelsea remained in custody for more than 3 years awaiting trial. In June 2025, she pleaded guilty. On June 11th, Judge John Stevens sentenced her to 40 years in prison. She was 28 at the time of the incident. If she serves the full sentence, she won't be eligible for release until around age 70. The judge described it as one of the most serious cases his courtroom had ever seen. Cody Arnold's case is still awaiting trial,